Well, Joe, we just finished watching Ubisoft's E3 2015 press conference.
We did. We did. Lots of stuff to go over there.
A lot of stuff to talk about. So let's kind of get started with the sort of new IP, new genre, as they claimed, that they opened the show with. Kind of probably the biggest surprise, other than their closer, which we'll get to in a little bit, was For Honor. What do you think of this title?
Yeah, I mean, I think this ties in a little bit actually to some of the stuff we were talking about yesterday at the Bethesda press conference when we were talking about Battlecry. I think that there's a certain I don't want to come out sounding skeptical right out of the gate, because there are definitely some things about that sound or that look very cool. But I have the same sort of question that when you're dealing with a large scale melee combat game, I think it's a thin line between a sort of kind of tactical excitement about it and just chaos.
Right. I mean, you've got some games that have tried melee combat that don't exactly have a lot of enthusiasm behind them that are in that same vein, that same kind of military thing. Yep. I'm not sure people would point to Dynasty Warriors and say that's a truly great game, or Rise Son of Rome was another recent game that tried to experiment with the large-scale military conflict thing, and I think a lot of people would say that game didn't turn out how they had hoped it would.
Yeah.
That's not to say that we need to group For Honor in that bunch. They very well may have hit upon something here that's a little bit more compelling and exciting, and they certainly looks like they have an interesting melee system in place.
Yeah. However, again, it felt like at some parts of that kind of felt like it was an old Assassin's Creed combat system. I like the idea of a sort of adrenaline or maybe more a tense combat experience, where you have to be very deliberate in your defense and your attack. I think that's a cool idea. But for a coming out party for a game like that, it seemed weird that there were some parts where it just seemed like they were kind of shuffling around each other and no one was really doing anything.
Yeah, that's true. I will say, though, that one of the things that I liked about it was that it felt like a real game demo. There hasn't been a lot of that at the show, at the press conferences we've seen so far. There's been a lot of preset, recorded either trailers or what few glimpses we've gotten of gameplay have often been things that have been preset. And you could tell that this was, a real thing going on, a little bit more representative of actual gameplay. And as we all know, actual gameplay doesn't have those sorts of set piece, everything flows in perfect time kind of vibe to them.
Even so, when you're coming out with a new IP, I mean, first you have to sort of educate people on what this is. When this is working well, when this is under ideal circumstances, this is the kind of experience the game provides.
Yeah. We saw a couple of little expansion packs. The crew is expanding out into some new cars, monster trucks, that kind of thing, along with these summits they described that are these kind of big race tournament kinds of things.
I think in general, when it comes to E3 though, it's a little bit hard to really get someone's blood pumping with, the announcement of an expansion, to a sort of decently received game.
Yeah.
A little bit same, but a little bit different is the other expansion they announced, which was for Trials Fusion.
Right.
So they did, Ubisoft did Blood Dragon, Far Cry Blood Dragon, which was just that totally gonzo 80s tribute.
And well loved. People loved that.
Oh, yeah. So it looks like they're doing a similar sort of let's get a little crazy with this by, instead of having you be on your motorcycle or whatever, you're
on a flaming unicorn.
Yeah, you're a weird cat on some kind of flaming unicorn.
Yeah.
And I mean, all of that stuff seems really cool. We had some feed troubles at that point, a little technical difficulty, but I didn't see anything of how that actually manifests in the game, what that means.
Right.
If it's just, I doubt it's just a new skin, right? I mean, it wouldn't just be hey, now you look like a unicorn, but you're doing all the same stuff.
Right.
So it's gotta present some sort of crazy options, some different way.
It's got to be very different, because a lot of how Trials Fusion functions just as a game is about handling the physics of two wheels.
Right.
You do not have two wheels on a four-legged unicorn, so that's not going to work. It's got to be something pretty different. Which, I don't know, I think that's kind of cool. I think your comparison to Blood Dragon is a good one, showing that Ubisoft is, I don't know, open to experimenting within established franchises, and that's great. We also got to see an extended section of The Division, showcasing this new Dark Zone thing. Which, okay, let's take a step back first, because I know both you and I thought that looked like a really frustrating experience where people were going to just shoot you all the time.
Yeah.
But I will say that The Division is shooting for a similar space in games to what Destiny has done, which is, they have this sort of open world, a cooperative experience. You're leveling up, you're getting new gear and loot and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And certainly there's not a lot of games like that yet on the market. And I think for a lot of folks, The Division has potential to be a competitor in that space.
Right. But would you play a mode in Destiny where you go in and you finally get, some legendary weapon that you want, and instead one of your buddies just like shoots you and takes it?
Yeah, it does seem problematic, and it's hard for me to imagine that anybody who goes in there isn't just going to always shoot. Like if they like have a sight on some other players, that they're not just going to be like, oh, well, they have stuff I want.
And if they don't shoot you immediately, they're going to shoot you eventually. So it's just, like, again, I don't. Maybe I'm missing something with this. Maybe maybe there's some layer of nuance that they haven't like explained, but it just seems like I like games where there can be a little bit of mind game between the different teams that are playing. And on this one, I'm just having trouble. Like, it just seems like it's greed 100%, and everyone's greedy. And because it's you know what I mean. You're anonymous on the internet, you can just be a jerk ass to whoever. And anyway.
What they showed off there is, I think, not what's going to be the normal scenario, right? Like, if you and I and a couple buddies are going in, I don't know that like we're going to be the kind of people who are going to go in there and shoot each other, right? In most cases. Maybe Joe would, but I'm not going to play with you then. Right?
Well, but exactly, that's the point. You don't play with people who do that.
And so those groups will probably remain largely loyal to each other, is what I'm saying, just by virtue of mutually assured destruction, I guess. And the other groups that might show up in those areas, maybe you do fight them, maybe you avoid them. There is still the PvE component that we saw of you taking out like powerful enemies that are in that space. It's kind of a neat idea that you would have a part of the game world. If the rest of the game world is more structured missions and things like that you could go to this space and be like, okay, if we go in there, it's really dangerous, but it's something that we can get really good loot. We might run into some other players. We might run into some like AI enemies who are harder than we can beat. But we're going to take a chance on that because we think we can go in and get something neat and then extract before we get totally wasted.
Yeah, and I think you hit on the important point in there, which is like it's a separate zone. It's not part of the. It doesn't seem like it's part of the sort of like core world that people are going to be interacting with. It's sort of an opt-in. If you want to play with internet jerks, you go right ahead.
Right. So we saw Ubisoft's entry into the city simulation genre, Anno 2205.
Right. Well, I mean, it's I think it's their series. There have been previous Anno games.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so this series, I think, is going to be is kind of interesting to me as somebody who likes games like SimCity and City Skylines, that kind of stuff, because it looks like it kind of provides some of that experience, but with a little bit of a sci-fi overlay.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I don't know a whole lot about this series. I've never been much of a fan of it. I like city simulations and the sort of situation they set up, which is, you sort of start from scratch and build your way up to sort of space capabilities, and then build your way up from that to like full-fledged space colonization. Seems like that's a scope that seems really interesting. It seems like they have a cool visual style to back it up. I'm curious as to all the different systems and the depth and how they work with each other, which is really sort of at the core of what makes a good simulation. So all of that, as long as there's no mandatory online, I think it's got a chance.
I like the idea of being able to go to the moon. That's kind of neat. I think one of the things I didn't get out of that demo, even though it seemed like they were talking that they were showing us some things that were kind of like the in-game engine stuff, we didn't really get to learn much about like how the game functions, what makes it distinct, how do you handle this sort of city building experience, and it feels like that, particularly for a genre like that, is something that's important. I know maybe that would be a little bit boring for a press conference. I get that.
Yeah.
But I felt like that was maybe there was something missing there of getting some sense of what this gameplay is like, or what makes it distinct from the other entries in the genre.
I'd agree with that. But the one thing about this entry that they pointed out also, though, is that it's coming to consoles in addition to PC, which has been a traditionally PC series. So.
Yeah. They showed off Just Dance 2016. No surprise there. This is an absolutely gigantic property for Ubisoft, even though it's not necessarily one that, you or I, or I think a lot of folks out there who are big Game Informer guys are necessarily, it's not necessarily everybody's favorite core gaming series, but there's no denying that it is a huge property for them. It's big with kids, it's big with families, it's big with markets that aren't traditional game consumers, and it's sort of a worldwide phenomenon, which is why we're getting new entries all the time.
Music is cool. People like dancing.
Exactly.
So if there's a game that facilitates that and people like it, more power to them.
The biggest thing that they had to say about that was the fact that you no longer need to have a camera on your console.
Yeah.
They're basically letting you use your smartphone.
I wonder how much of that is inspired by looking at the number, like the attach rate numbers of like how many people with an Xbox One have a Kinect?
Yeah.
How many people with a PS4 have a camera?
Yeah.
And then being like, we need a different solution here.
Well, absolutely, especially once Microsoft had abandoned the Kinect last year and proved that this year at their press conference this morning.
They didn't even mention it, right?
They did not mention Kinect.
Yeah.
The only, as we talked about in our post-analysis of Microsoft's conference, the only presence of the Kinect during that show was somebody giving a couple voice commands, and that was it. And so that's as clear of an indicator as you can get that the what was once this all-in commitment to Kinect's always going to be important for the Xbox and to the Xbox One just hasn't panned out. The game's coming out in October, along with this new Just Dance Unlimited streaming service, which
just seems like a subscription, more songs.
That was.
You're subscribed, you get more songs.
Yeah, sort of an ongoing thing that you can just kind of plug into and like party.
Yeah, another big sort of franchise that they put out in front of us again was Rainbow Six Siege, which I believe we saw at E3 last year for the first time.
Yeah.
Which is what we've seen up to this point anyway has been a very multiplayer-focused affair that has sort of two teams going up against each other and using environmental destruction to sort of complete their different objectives. In addition to seeing that they have Angela Bassett.
Right, which is awesome
in there, which is sweet. She's an impressive actress, so I think that'll be good for them.
I mean, when I saw it, for a second there, I was almost when it showed itself to be Rainbow Six, I was almost thinking, is this a new Rainbow Six? Because they've been so committed to the idea of this sort of multiplayer mode experience of Rainbow Six Siege and have been very resistant to talking about anything related to a campaign or anything like that. The idea that you had Angela Bassett in here with this long narration, why would you do that for just a multiplayer experience?
Yeah, you don't bring that in unless you've got some sort of like story-focused thing going on.
But sure enough, they followed up that thing explaining that it was part of Rainbow Six Siege and that they're bringing in that sort of terror hunt.
Tarot hunt,
sorry. Experience, which is kind of their answer to solo and cooperative play without the competitive element.
Yeah.
And the onstage demo for that I thought looked rad. I mean, you had all that cool destructibility. The use of the drones looks like it's continued to advance since what we saw last year when there was a demo on the show floor.
Yeah, you've got people like rappelling to get into a building, and blowing down walls, taking down the hostile. Still a lot of teamwork going on. It seems like if that's what you're into. But I think people kind of look at environmental destruction as one of the things that could and or should be sort of defining this generation of hardware that we're on now.
Yeah.
And I think Siege does a good job of showing the potential of like you see a wall there, blow through it and create like a strategic opening. And it's not just a thing where there's like a crack in the wall that says like, hey, you can blow a hole here if you want, you know? So I'm think that's going to be fun.
Yeah.
I want to see more of how it turns out.
And as we saw at the end there, that has that kind of Left 4 Dead or Mass Effect 3 multiplayer kind of final sequence that you have to deal with.
Yeah, like a sort of extraction moment.
Exactly. Here it's for defusing the bomb, and there's a bunch of enemies kind of charging in as you hold the space, so that you're having to get in the solo cooperative experience. You're getting that hold a space experience that is part of the multiplayer part, where you're defending in addition to attacking. So I thought that looked like it'd be a lot of fun, and that the fact that they're coming along with a September 24th beta for Siege is also really great news. It's not that far off. Trackmania was out there.
Oh, Trackmania. Okay.
The biggest news there is that it's coming to next-gen consoles.
Yeah. It's a crazy racing game. Lots of speed.
Lots of speed. I mean, there's probably not a whole lot for us to talk about other than the fact that I think it's cool that it is making its way to a broader audience at this point.
Yeah.
They talked about having 200 tracks in the game, as well as this kind of neat random track generator thing, which I would think for those kind of wild, zany, arcadey style of racing would be a lot of fun to just be able to make a track and see how fast you can get through it.
Yeah, I agree. I don't have a whole lot to add about Trackmania, but I can talk about AC Syndicate.
Yes, indeed. So what do you think of what you saw?
Well, okay, so here's the interesting thing. I thought that, like in years past, that they would sort of use this as one of the like major, long things that they were going to talk about.
Yeah.
Do an extended sort of presentation on it. Then I remember, though, that with their reveal, they actually did do a fairly, they spent, a 5 or 10 minute like gameplay demo on it when they showed it a couple months ago. So I guess I can understand that they stuck to a little more of a cinematic trailer sort of experience to it. But I think, I don't know, as we were talking about before the press conference, they haven't shown a whole lot about this game so far that is like, this is a real sort of step forward versus the sort of, this is an incremental sort of nudge forward.
Yeah.
They haven't shown much to demonstrate that it's more than a nudge, but that doesn't mean that, exploring this new time period, this new city won't be interesting.
Yeah.
So I mean, like I'm still excited to play it. I still want to see what they have going on, but.
Yeah, I was a little disappointed, to be honest. I mean, I thought that the focus on this cinematic sequence had a couple of issues for me. One was that it was this really long cinematic, which was beautiful, admittedly. I mean, it was a really exciting thing to watch.
Yeah.
But it didn't really give me any new sense of what's going on in the game. I didn't get to see any real gameplay.
And you don't have a totally clear sense of like, what am I seeing right now that's supposed to represent like what it's going to play like, and what is just like a cinematic thing.
Yeah, exactly.
The lines were a little blurry there for sure.
I mean, the clearest thing that they communicated through that cinematic was that the gang building aspect of the story of Jacob building up the rooks is a big part of the story.
But just saying it's important, but nothing about how that works.
Yeah.
So I wonder if they said it's going to be on the show floor.
Yeah.
Like they say it's playable. So maybe we'll have, like once the show starts tomorrow afternoon, like once the doors open properly, we'll get some hands-on impressions and get a little more of a sense of it. Because I don't think that trailer was the best way to get people excited about it.
I tend to agree with you. Not to mention the fact that the more I've heard about this game, the more I sort of feel the conflicting hand of the creative voice of the studio against what presumably someone in their marketing department would like to be presenting about the game. We still have we keep hearing from the developers on stage or during presentation that this is a game about two characters, and yet we don't see the second character at all during this presentation for E3.
That's true. I mean, that's a fair complaint, and at the same time, it's also like they're also making progress, so it's kind of hard. I mean, for me, it's hard to get like too angry because like just last year it was why can't you be a woman? And now they are saying, well, you can be a woman. Why don't you show us you being a woman?
Right.
Which again, like I'm not saying that isn't a valid complaint, but I'm saying it's at least there's a step forward. So it's hard for me to get too upset about it. I mean, I don't know. That's
From my
take.
angle, it's less a matter of whether that other character was a guy or a girl or an animal.
Just it's another main character that they're not showing.
That they're not
yeah,
showing.
for sure.
And
for
that
sure.
if they're saying that it is a main character, that this is the story of these two siblings. I don't know why at this point. I mean, E3 seems like your opportunity, especially if you announce with your main character being Jacob.
Yeah.
That E3 is a great opportunity to kind of like blow out your other main character and talk about what makes that character different, why they're going to be compelling. Maybe it's part of this sort of longer marketing plan that they're going to roll out more information about her at Gamescom, or try to hold off really people knowing anything about her until launch or something odd like that.
Yeah.
But I honestly feel like it's a missed opportunity, because you think about a game like the most recent Grand Theft Auto, and that 3-person team was one of the most compelling things going into that title that you could look forward to. The idea that you'd have these different perspectives, you'd have different angles on the action. You'd have one guy who was this total crazy guy, and another guy who was sort of a family man.
Yeah.
That made it really something to be looked forward to. And I feel like, I don't know, it's weird that they haven't embraced that yet with this game.
It makes me a little scared that it may not be as big of a thing as they want us to think.
That may very well be true.
Then the last thing we've got is the rebirth.
One more thing?
They're one more thing. Our show's done. Here's one more surprise, which is a new Ghost Recon. Recon Wildlands, it is?
Yeah, Wildlands looks like a big departure, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. A big departure from what we know Ghost Recon to be. Not so big a departure from what we know
Ubisoft?
Far Cry and Ubisoft to be in general, you know? So, I mean, it seems like I said when we were watching it, they definitely know the parts of their open world formula that they do well, you know, like a world full of a lot of different activities, different pathways through to different objectives. All of that sort of stuff seems to be present in full force. It has a Ghost Recon name, which means that it also has more of an emphasis on sort of military technology and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So,
I did like the way they sort of presented it as being these distinct ways that you could approach any given challenge. You got the sort of ambush or stealth approach, all leading to it was effectively the same mission, but
just done in different ways. And we've seen lots of games in the past sort of say, hey, you can do a mission this way or this way. And I think over time we've gotten to a spot where those are more dynamic. It used to just sort of be like, if you're stealthy, that just means you go through the door labeled stealth. And if you're action, it means you go through the door labeled guns or something. You know, it seems like it's getting a little more responsive and stuff. That looks like a lot of fun. I want to get in there and sort of experiment with the world, especially if it's sort of, you know, if the characters in the world react to you in different ways, and if it's possible to sort of mess with people. I always like that.
Yeah. The challenge in that space is, of course, always they can show off all they want, how many different ways that you might be able to do it. But if inevitably it always devolves into a throwdown fight.
Yeah, if it's always just chaos all the time.
Which happens, right? There's
happen.
lots of games where they advertise, there's all sorts of options. But at the end of the day, it's like, well, they saw you.
Yeah.
So now it's a big fight.
Yeah. There's going to be some balance going to be done. But at the end of the day, I think, you know, bringing back a franchise like Ghost Recon, even with a, you know, slightly different spin, is still a good move on their part. I also think it's good that, I think that was sort of one of the show stealers here, and for the company that sort of infamously leans on Assassin's Creed all the time, I think for them to have some other games that people are coming out of this talking more about, maybe not the best sign for Assassin's Creed, but is at least a good sign for, you know, Ubisoft as a whole.
And we'll see. I mean, there's still the possibility that one or more of those Ubisoft games may make it to the final show of the evening, which we are going to be back to cover here in just a couple of hours. Sony's press conferences this evening. Maybe we'll see more about Assassin's Creed Syndicate. Maybe we'll even see more from some of these other games that Ubisoft has shown. But whatever it is, we will be here to talk about it. And we'll hope that you all join us then when the Sony press conferences starts.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in.
We'll see you later. Thanks for watching.